We are live. We are live. We are live. Well, again, thank you for all of our listening and viewing audience as we are here yet again on a chilly Wednesday outside. But nevertheless, we are here bringing you news that you can use on Let's Talk About It, where your voice matters. This is a platform for you to be able to be heard. So again, as we always say, if you got anything that you need to talk about, get off your chest, anything that services that you're providing to the community, resources that you're providing to the community, please come on down and share that with the community, because I'm certain whatever it is that you're sharing, resources, whatever, people need those resources and services. If there's something you're just trying to get off your chest and want to talk about it, I'm sure you're not the only one that's thinking about it and need to talk about it. So again, connect with us, come on down, and we will get you on. Speaking of being on, brother, I'm not in the studio today. However, I hear that we have a special guest in the studio.
Yes, we do. We have Amari. Amari, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Amari Miller. I'm 23
Mr.
years
Miller,
old.
how are you, sir? I'm sorry. I'm sorry I can't be there with you in the studio. But quickly, before we kind of jump in, tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Amari.
23 years young. I'm more of an outside person, so I don't know.
Where'd you grow up at, man?
Chicago, Illinois. Well, Harvey, Illinois.
Okay. Oh, Harvey. Okay. All right. I'm definitely familiar with Harvey. And how long you been here in Minnesota, brother?
I was living out here for 2 years previously. I'm just now moving back up here in February.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome back. Welcome back. And I'm sure that you're in good hands with Allstate over there, meaning Mr. Joseph Banks.
Oh, of course.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes,
Hey,
sir.
let me ask you this here. Are you into sports? Are you into basketball?
Yes.
You're in good hands. Okay. So, did you happen to see the game between the Minnesota Timberwolves game and then also the Warriors game? Did you happen to see any of those two games last night?
Yeah. I watched the highlights of them. I know Steph Curry I think he went for like 52. And
Yes, sir.
and then they won the double overtime and won by one. So yeah, there was some
Absolutely.
good games.
Yes, they were. And I would just like to kind of piggyback on that is that, as folks know that both of these teams are my two teams, and it's just nice to see how the Warriors have kind of crept up into the fifth seed. And even though that Minnesota is still in the seventh seed, they are tied, for that sixth seed. I'm not really concerned about, what seed an individual's in, because once you make it, you got to show up to show out, and you got to win and beat whomever it is that you're playing, no matter if it's first seed, eighth seed, you got to show up and play. And anybody can kind of be, beaten on any, given night.
Now, Beeks, I'm a little messy, so I want to bag it up a little bit and kind of.
Here we go.
Yeah, what happened with that Detroit game, man? That skirmish between the T-Wolves, the coaches, and good old fashioned Detroit. Looked like there was some physicalness that was out and about in that game. Did you see that one?
I did.
Yes, I saw that one.
Minnesota's are aggressive.
Let me say this here. These Detroit Pistons, kind of remind me back when they had Joe Dumars and Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah.
Yes. They remind me of that crew, and again, I'm not mad, nor am I hating on Detroit or anything like that. I wish them well as well, but I do know their big man. I want to say his name is Isaiah something. I can't
Isaiah
remember
Stewart.
the big man. Yes, Isaiah Stewart.
He always trying to fight somebody.
He is, and he's really done. he's going to have to kind of control himself a little bit because he's going to end up finding himself, being suspended, being fined,
Possibly banned.
Possibly banned. I don't necessarily think he'll agree that he's going to be banned, and I'm going to tell you why. Is because unfortunately, even with his rough tactics, his rough style of play, his aggressive or assertive style of play, he is bringing money into the NBA.
Well, if they banned him, they'd got to fire Draymond Green.
I was thinking that too. I was gonna say Draymond Green too for sure. I was definitely thinking that. Yes, he didn't do some crazy things.
Draymond had already signed the contract that it says he's allowed at least 3 chokings, 2 elbows.
They talking about Steve Kirby sicking him on people. He'd be on the bench. He'd be like, "Yep, go ahead."
He's the Dennis Rodman of today's world, right?
Yeah. Well, I wish. All of these players, nothing but success because they have definitely, put in that work, in order to make it to that level of play. They all. I'm sorry.
Now, I was going to say, since you like the Timberwolves so much, did you hear about what happened with Anthony Edwards?
Oh, in his child support situation?
In the child support situation.
Yeah, what was it, $180 million up front for 18 years?
For 18 years. He is trying to pay that
off. That was a total pay. That was a total pay for 18 years.
Yeah, and what's crazy about that, man, is that, you know what, though? They didn't put any cost of living increases in there. So he didn't. Well, he didn't dodge the bullet.
There's a whole bunch of incentives on why he did what he did, and I'm just thankful. Well, it's unfortunate, number one, that Anthony Edwards and his baby's mother, could not work things out to be a family. I'm hoping that Mr. Edwards is still able to be a part of his child's life without too much confliction between the two parents, and they're able to kind of co-parent and things of that nature.
You know what I like about it, though, is I like that it kills the scandal, right? Usually you get guys like, Isaiah and those guys who come out and they played a good game, but then they got scandalized off the court by not taking care of child support. In his situation, he took that away. You can't say that he's making all this money and not stepping up financially to support his child. So I think that's a good look.
I actually think
absolutely.
I actually think he don't want to be in the child's life because he already expressed to her multiple times he didn't want the baby, and she still had the baby. So I think that's why he's paying the child support.
Well, again, there's a lot of different, factors that kind of come into play. But this is why, you as young people need to pay attention and be aware, of when we decide to lay down and do adult type activities, but yet we are not prepared for potential outcomes. And then we have certain things occur, and we're not necessarily mentally, physically, financially ready to take care of those type of situations. It becomes very hard, not necessarily on the parent so much, but primarily on that unborn or that born child now has to kind of grow up with all of these various different stigmas and concerns and issues and things of that nature that he or she will face along the way. So young people, again, be mindful, when you call yourself trying to be grown. There's a lot of different things that kind of go along with that. Talk to, your elders, someone, if it's not your mother, your father, your aunt, your uncle, find some elders that you trust and you respect, and get some insight and don't think or believe that, you know everything or that you can kind of go out and do things just because now you're 18 years of age or whatever the case may be. There's a lot to life out here. And if you don't, do things right, it can be very taxing on us. So that's my take. And I'm not going to, go any further with Mr. Edwards and his situation. So, just blessings to him, the baby's mother, and that child. But again, I'm looking forward to this upcoming NFL season. As we always kind of talk about, Joe, I'm very pleased with the way that my beloved Vikings is spending their money and who they're selecting, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Did the Steelers do anything here recently in regards to a quarterback? Have they done anything with that position yet, or that's still up?
We're still working that out. There's still some things that we're working on. It also sounds like that there's a good chance that we might have a shot at Dak Prescott, and we may be looking over Aaron Rodgers and possibly sending him on to the Vikings. The Vikings expressed some interest in talking to Aaron Rodgers about their starting position. So I think that was the coach from the Vikings who said that they're going to talk with them, see what it looks like. They're hoping that their first-round pick that got injured last year will show up really good and end up their starter. But in case he doesn't, they're looking at shopping elsewhere. So we haven't been able to really lock things down with Rodgers. He's done some. I'm gonna come on board, but every time we try to finalize a contract, he's kind of adding some extras. And so, in Pittsburgh, we have a motto: if you won't play, someone else will. And so we've already slotted Kyle Rudolph to possibly be our starter. So, and we got Metcalf and some other things working. So we look to be pretty well-to-do. In fact, I think that starting next week, we're going to probably open it up for probably 10 or 12 more Steeler fans to come on out and try and join the club and root for our team. We try to limit it each year. There's so many people fighting to be Steeler fans.
Well, hey, with that being said, since I know Mr. Banks, a.k.a. the GM, I'm sure I can always stick on a jersey, right? I can always come aboard.
Yes, sir. There's always room for another Steeler fan.
All right. Well, man, before we kind of really get started, with today's, show, and, it's always very interesting, to really kind of speak to community members, in regards to various concerns, that they have in our today's society, and the worries, that they have, pertaining to, their everyday life and, and what's kind of, ahead of them, things of that nature. I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over to you, brother, so you can go ahead and give them some housekeeping rules and hit them with that same backpack.
Yes, sir. As you know, we're here every week from 5 to 6-ish, and we just ask that you respect everyone's comments, wishes, and things of that nature. If you have any questions, remember you can inbox us, call us, text us. And if we can't get your answers done on this show, we'll do it on the very next show. Remember, we simply just ask you to respect everybody's comments and make sure that yours are respectable, too. No such thing as a bad question, maybe just bad timing. With that being said, we start, middle, and end every show with that backpack. That backpack consists of making sure you have your driver's license and insurance with you before you get in that vehicle. Remember to place them above the visor. That way, if stopped by law enforcement, they're easily accessible. Remember to stay calm. Keep your hands where they can be seen. Allow the officer to go through his spiel. And as always, make it on home to your loved ones. Same thing when walking down the street. Make sure you got your driver's license or ID where it's easily accessible. Remember to stay calm. Keep your hands where they can be seen. Allow the officer to go through his spiel. And as always, make it on home to your loved ones.
Indeed. And if I can just kind of piggyback on that just a little bit. So then therefore, when you are in those vehicles, and whether it's just you and or multiple individuals, please make sure that you are rolling down all windows, turning on those dome lights, turning off that engine, and again, making sure that you're keeping your hands. Everyone is kind of keeping their hands in plain view. So then therefore, there is no further movement. I do know in some cases it can be kind of hot outside sometimes, or it can be kind of cold outside, but that is just a mere inconvenience, but again, as Joe always say, you got to make sure that you're making it, to your destination. And
before we get started, bro, I wanted to ask you, I saw that article you sent over to me with the gentleman who had both his legs cut off and the police shot him 11 times. That was kind of crazy, man. What agency was that? Did you get a chance to?
I can't remember, the agency. but we can definitely talk about that here just really quick. For those that don't know or not aware, we always say this here. Let me start by saying this: is that we are pro-police, but we're pro-good police. When these officers are out here doing illegitimate things to the community that they have sworn to protect and serve, shame on you. Because whatever it is that you're doing in the dark, shall someday kind of come to light. And with everyone having cameras up all over the place, cell phones, et cetera, even these body cams, are getting these officers, caught up in their own situation. So in this particular situation that Joe was talking about, I want to say that it was down in California somewhere, but don't quote me on that. I should have brought that up. But anyway, it was a double amputee, 36-year-old African-American male that they kind of came in contact with. I don't know why they even originally kind of came in contact with this individual as he was rolling down the street in his wheelchair. At some point, he brandished a pretty large, kitchen-style type of knife. Mm-hmm. And he hopped out of his wheelchair and attempted to start running, down the street. And at some point, he was surrounded by multiple officers with weapons and things of that nature drawn. And he had threw the knife in the officer's direction.
Right.
And so this is when they felt or believed that their life was in jeopardy or in danger. Mm-hmm. And they shot this male 7 times, killing him, on scene. Now, there's a whole bunch of different questions and concerns pertaining to this shooting. I do understand that these officers who did fire upon this young man is currently facing, numerous charges. And again, I understand and I realize that, any conviction, is not going to bring this young man back, and this is a very unfortunate situation for all parties involved. But they will, hopefully that family will receive the justice, that they deserve. Yeah, and I will say this here. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I did a little peek at it too. It just sounds like they got a call of an individual that had been stabbed with some pretty serious injuries. The gentleman was having a little mental health breakdown, but as you said, he was a double amputee. He was kind of running on his lower portions of his upper legs, and he wasn't able to move fast. And at that point, it didn't appear that he was, looking at the video, it didn't appear that he was aggressive enough where it warranted, them being not afraid. So, yeah, everybody kind of thought that maybe they could have used some less than lethal. And it sounded like that one of the judges in the civil case agreed and set the matter on for a trial next year for a civil suit as well.
Yeah, because they could have tased him.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will say this here, being former law enforcement, even though that my our license was still active, still current, just not active. I can't see in the video portion that I saw that there was at any time that any of those officers was in any great or immediate great bodily harm and or death. This is where we talk about all the time, Joe, is how people need to slow things down. You have all day to bring this situation to a peaceful resolution. I don't think we'll agree at any time that this warranted a deadly force shooting.
No,
I mean, you could have maced them, you could have tased them,
well, they
you
could have
could have
just left him
attempted to kind
alone
of talk to
because
them.
at some point they realized he had a mental health issue, and then the second part of it is, he was moving away from them, not toward them. Generally we shoot to stop the threat that's advancing upon us, not moving away. So they had ample opportunity to utilize other measures. They just chose not to, and then shooting the guy 11 times. And sounded like they even tried to kind of suppress the fact that the guy was a double amputee in a wheelchair. So it was a really bad situation. But thank God that they were able to get these guys in front of a judge, and are some things are pending there, so they can try and get some justice for his family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say this here that, I know for a long time, there's a lot of community members that thought, felt, and believed that, that officers are going to just do what they're going to do. The system is going to do what they're going to do, and it's not going to be in the favor, of the citizens, especially when we're talking about, black and brown people, et cetera, et cetera. But as we all have seen, over this last, 3 to 5, maybe 6 years or so, maybe a tad bit more, these officers are being held accountable. Maybe not to the level of magnitude that we think so and believe that they should, but we have definitely seen a lot more officers being held accountable for their actions. The only thing that I would like to tweak, to that there is that when these departments are basically being sued, based off of an officer's action, I really think and believe that that officer should be held accountable for a certain percentage of that lawsuit. I think when individuals are hit, financially, and it's not that the taxpayers and so on and so forth is basically paying themselves, because that's where they're getting basically a good portion of the money from when they're paying this lawsuit out. That these guys need to be held accountable for a certain portion of that lawsuit out of their own pocket. And this is when you will start to see, officers, paying closer attention to how they're treating, individuals out here in the community.
Oh yeah.
So, but again, when we're talking about, young folks, like our guest in the studio, Mr. Amari, it's extremely important, then that you guys, don't take things too personal, at that particular point in time. Don't get caught up in your emotions, or feeling and believing that, you're going to be defiant and all this other type of stuff. When this happens, you only give law enforcement, that officer at that particular point in time, a little bit more ammunition, to call themselves trying to justify that stop or that interaction or whatever the case may be. As Joe has always stated, there's a time and a place for you to be able to follow up and follow through with whatever complaint or lawsuit, that you may file. But being out there on the street, whether that's, you're on the corner, or you're walking down the street, or you're in a vehicle, or whatever the case may be, that is not the time, to be sticking out the chest, trying to be defiant, things of that nature. If they're going to violate your civil rights, your Fourth and Fifth Amendments, or whatever the case may be, hey, let them do so. If that's indeed the case, then it's just an easy lawsuit for you to win, right?
That's right. The goal is to go home to your loved ones.
Absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely.
I felt like, though, a lot of these situations happen because, one, the police be ignorant, and two, us young people probably not knowing the laws as well, so that they get to take advantage of at a certain point. I feel like a lot of it happened because we don't have the right people in our ear telling us how to deal with these situations. I don't know.
Well, I think I think you're 110% correct. I think there's a lot of different factors, and this is why when you have those pieces in your corner that can kind of help guide you, take advantage of that. And when you don't have it, then that's when you should, seek that information. So therefore, you can be able to be better prepared. So then therefore, when situations do occur, you're able to better represent yourself, when you're out there in the community.
Because they don't like when black people know the law, especially when you know it better than them.
Well, yeah. Again, each situation, is definitely different, and the more that the more that the better your chances are of being able to make it home to your loved one, and that is definitely what we need to ensure happens.
Well, Beeks, I'm gonna let you jump back into your agenda, but one more quick tidbit too. I don't know if you saw it, but Sheriff Witt was on the Hill this week talking to legislators about a program that she had been studying over in San Diego that was supposed to improve recruitment and retention with the Sheriff Department in terms of having the state assist with Pacific child care assistance for folks involved in law enforcement. Did you get a chance to peek at that at all?
No, I did not get a chance to peek at that at all. And the only thing I will say is it doesn't sound like it will hurt. Mm. However, I'm sure that there's a lot of different other things that we would have to kind of take into consideration. And so before I would really kind of respond to that, I would have to kind of do a little bit more homework on that. But I will say this here, in addition to potentially helping law enforcement families with child care or whatever the case may be, I also think truly believe that they could bring have a program to where that they're having officers, allowing them to purchase homes in these revitalization areas to bring, officers into these communities. Not only police officers, but firemen and medics and, things of that nature to kind of help build that trust and that rapport and that respect, of the justice system as a whole, and that includes medics and firemen and so on and so forth. We have to be able to get back to, it takes a village to raise a child, and not get us against them or me against you. I'm black, you're white, I'm straight, you're lesbian, whatever the case may be. Again, the homework that I have done over the course of time, we are more alike than we are different. And we pretty much all want the same thing. We want safety, we want prosperity, and we want transparency. If we can kind of get these things, then I think that as a whole, we will be better off. But you said it best, Joe, many a times. It behooves me on why we as people, especially when we kind of reach certain plateaus or certain levels in society, certain positions, that we don't want to admit when we get things wrong.
Exactly.
And that, I believe, is what is hurting America today, is because we don't want to admit when we got things wrong, because we think people are going to use it against us, feel a certain way, whatever the case may be. I don't know if we will ever kind of, get to that point, but that's where we need to be.
Yes, sir. And until we can admit when we get it wrong, we won't be able to fix it.
And then when we admit that we got something wrong, have something in place on how we can fix it. So then therefore we can follow up and follow through with that plan of fix, so then therefore we can look back, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, whatever it is from day one, and say, this is what we have done, over the last 90 to 120 days, and this is where we plan to be in our next 120 days. And so then therefore we can, again, hold one another accountable and be able to move forward with it.
Yes, this is true.
So,
all right, Beeks,
yeah,
so we'll let
absolutely.
you jump back into your agenda, man, so we can get back on track here.
Well, you know what? Anything and everything that we share here on Let's Talk About It, which we are here each and every Wednesday from 5 until 6, is relevant, right? Sometimes we have an agenda and we kind of come in with a game plan, but then all of a sudden, we have a special guest such as Amari in the building, and all of a sudden things just kind of, take a little turn, but that is okay because this is what it's all about. It's about informing, educating, and enhancing our people, enhancing our communities, so then therefore we can be better as a unit. With that being said, there's been a lot of scuttlebutt. There's been a lot of conversation. I was on a couple different, Zoom meetings this week in regards to our nation, our country, and just kind of where we're at. And we've kind of talked about this a little bit, over the last, several weeks or whatever the case may be. But I thought that, it was best for us to kind of hold, a show kind of about this. And we may have to kind of, hold some additional shows about it, because people are having a lot of concerns. They're having a lot of worries, as they're starting to really see pricing, going up on food and cars. They're talking about the car industry and how Tesla has lost a tremendous amount of money, and how there's been various different dealerships kind of throughout the country that have had to shut down, because of safety issues and customers being burnt and all this other type of stuff. And so that's just bringing a lot of different worries and concerns. One of those things is, and this is some feedback that I would definitely love to kind of get from our special guest that's in the house, you being an African-American male and being 23 years of age. So you would definitely kind of fall, into this category, I'm certain. But one of those things is a lot of mothers and fathers are concerned about is the draft. Is the draft going to happen? Is it not going to happen? If it happens, how would it work? Who would it affect? Et cetera, et cetera. And again, there's so many different outlets, talking about this here that I was really, truly unable to really kind of get a strong bead on if this draft is actually factual or if it's just, kind of fiction and those are just kind of making things up and to kind of get, United States citizens, concerned and worried.
Yeah.
But
I think it's just, I think they're just trying to get folks worried. I mean, one, there would have to be a declaration of war agreed to and approved by Congress before we could even enter a draft, and we were away from that for right now. And I think that most folks are thinking that, there's going to be a war based on the fact that the president is enforcing some tariffs. And those are not necessarily going to lead to combat wars. We're looking more at price wars and things of that nature. And we're pretty fortified infrastructurally for the United States. And so I think that a lot of it is, fear, right? Yeah. People have fear that the prices are going to go up, so the prices go up. And I don't even think they're paying attention to what they're fearing, right? Right now, eggs are between $8 and $9 a dozen. And it's because there's a fear that there aren't going to be enough eggs. And the unique part of that is they're not even paying attention because how do we have eggs expensive but the chickens are cheap? So And last time I checked, the chicken came out of the egg, or the egg came out of the chicken. One of the two, right? And so
What came first, right?
right. And so at some point, how do we have too many chickens and no eggs?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just all about the propaganda and putting you in the mindset. In terms of tariffs, when it comes to vehicles, man, let me tell you something. As much as we would love to cut the other countries off and raise the prices, unfortunately, we've spent many years outsourcing our vehicle parts to outside countries. And so even if we could put together an American car, it's going to take us a little while to try to duplicate the chips that go in those bad boys to make them work. Now, that's not to say that we couldn't do it, but it's going to be, just a little more work for us to figure out how to put those chips in place here in our country and not have to pay extra, cost for that. So, I really think that this is just a moment in time, man, that we just have to ride out. And as you can see, so many of his constituents are already starting to kind of pull away from the core, right? I think CNN said it best that, his approval rating has dropped an additional 22% in the polls. And so some people are happy, a lot of people aren't. A lot of just don't really understand what a tariff really is and how it affects the economy. And of course, like you said, Elon Musk has his stock has dropped about 50% in the last couple of weeks. However, what they're not talking about is the fact that he did cut that deal with India for several $1 billion for Tesla. So he ain't hurting that bad. And if you check, Elon was just in Wisconsin this week handing out $1 million checks to support the judges' elections over there in Wisconsin. So he ain't crying.
And then it's like every time Trump in office, it's always about to be a war. It was just going to be a war with North Korea.
So, yeah, I mean, you make a good point. I mean, the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of, propaganda, or to use a lot of Trump terms, there's some fake news out there mixed in with that truthful stuff, and so people are being slightly misled. I mean, this time last year, people were hoarding tissue and all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, you just have to be careful what you take to mind. Like no one's talking about the measles outbreak, right? There's been supposedly a measles outbreak in Texas, and it involves several people getting the measles.
It's always another virus.
And it sounds scary. However, most of us that were born in the 70s got the measles vaccine years ago. So if you got the measles, rubella, and chickenpox vaccine, you're pretty much good to go. So, yeah.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think that, when we're kind of talking about, the draft and like you said, there's so many different things that would need to occur in order to make that happen. Folks was even talking about that they would have to bring back those that are non-active, military personnel before they would kind of get to a potential draft and, things of that nature. But I will say this here. Whether it is fact or fiction, it is definitely creating, worry, concern, anxiety, things of that nature among, the American people. People are still talking about, what they're now calling the roundup, of Hispanics. And how a lot of these Hispanic individuals that they're rounding up or taking into custody, are individuals that are not even on, the so-called list of those that were here, illegally and creating all type of safety concerns or, just committing crime and things of that nature.
Yeah, but the courts have put a kibosh on a lot of that. So, there is that fear that that ICE could show up and snatch you up. But I don't know if people have realized it, though. The courts have put a couple kiboshes on a lot of that. The last time I saw, I think the courts did an indefinite kind of, this can't work deal, simply because of the fact that the method in which they were going about, the methodology that they were utilizing was, in violation of constitutional rights that were in place. And so I think they've kind of they're still kind of doing some enforcement, which is what we do all year round anyway. But I think there's less than likely of a chance for folks that are either born here in America to be extradited. And then, of course, excuse me, there's a process for those who aren't. And so it's more than just we're going to snatch folks up and drop them outside the country. First, we have to verify that they're actually from the countries in which we're saying they're from, and we're still getting to get permission from those countries to return them to those countries. So it's not cut and dry. And there again, the fear that people have of this happening, and like I said, remember, some of these folks are people who went to the polls and voted for Trump, knowing his intention.
Right.
So, you have to take time to think about, like, what does your vote really mean, your voice in the country, and what is the American dream, right, and what the Constitution will and will not allow. And then I think what some people are confusing too, there's some confusion between federal and state authority powers and how the Congress works. And so Trump doesn't have a blank check, right? He does have some executive authority, but that executive authority still needs to be approved through Congress and in some cases the Supreme Court. So, it's just not going to happen. I heard some people saying the other day that they were shocked that Trump hadn't mentioned some possibility of trying to run for a third term. And we would definitely have to alter the Constitution to make that happen, which I don't see that happening no time soon. So, not only that, let's not pretend that President Trump is doing such a great job that so many people would be just, oh my God, we have to have him again, right? So that's just not going to happen. There are people right now going, okay, we made it through the first 100 days. We got 200 and some odd days to go this year, So they're already counting it off, man. And then the funny part I think people don't realize too is, you really have to monitor politics. There's already some internal uglies going on inside his cabinet between the VP and things of that nature, and some comments that are said on the record what they thought were off the record about the lack of agreement between the president, the VP, and other people. And then this last 2 weeks, I know you saw that the leaders, the secretary of the country, was basically having some classified conversations over an open channel that accidentally included a reporter about a strike on someone in a different country, and that drew some attention to national security. So it's when you get people who aren't experienced, that are in positions that are normally ran by folks who have years of experience, you'll get some hiccups, and that's kind of what we have. And that's what we have with Elon Musk and Doge, and that's why they're kind of upsetting a few people, because you don't know what you're doing, and and you're having to go back and fix it. Prime example, and then I'll let you get back on here, Beeks, is that you saw Musk fired 300 people who were actually in charge of our nuclear warheads and tracking and keeping a track of those folks. And they had to go back and rehire them because, you were going to just walk away from, nuclear warheads and stuff like that and not even figure out that these are the only guys that are doing it.
Right.
So it's just, just things like that. It just, we have to pay attention to.
And then we let a president that was just in jail in office.
So Mr. Amari, I want to ask you a question. You being an African American male and 23 years of age, and you kind of heard some of the topics that we're kind of talking about today, whether it's fact or fiction. I don't know if you agree or not agree. With that, it's still kind of creating conversation. Kind of creating anxiety and things of that nature. Do you think, or believe that young people, as yourself, are paying attention, to this type of thing, or is it that, they don't care, or is it not that it's important to them? What do you think that young people are kind of facing when it kind of comes to this?
I feel like a lot of young people probably not gonna realize until it's too late. Like everybody so in tune with like social media, but not when it comes to like stuff like this. When it comes to politics and with Donald Trump and everything, everybody see a little bit, and then by the time they look up and stuff hitting the fan, and it's time probably for a draft or something like that, everybody gonna be like, wait, when did all this happen? But it just happened in our face this whole time.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback off that, man, I don't know if you are aware of it, but when you turned 18 as a man in the United States, you're required to register for the Selective Service. All right, and what that does is that's the pool that they're pulling from when they decide to do a draft. So you're right at that age, that crucial age when you would be guaranteed a shot at going into combat.
Yeah, I know.
And you know,
like
defending the
right?
honor of this country.
And it's 25
No,
or 26?
no, not doing a draft. It's any and all available men that would be able to go into the draft. So we like you said, Beeks, we generally start with prior military personnel recently retired, and then when that's depleted, we start looking at young men ages 18 to 40.
Oh wow!
Doing combat times that would be in a position to go in and protect our great country and the rights that we have. So kudos to you for being 23 and right at that age, motivated and dedicated.
I'm glad you think that. They're going to be mad because I'm going to pull a Muhammad Ali. I'm playing.
So, but I mean, that is an important fact that a lot of people don't realize is that, there are some things in place that could potentially put you in a position, but we're not necessarily looking at war. Thankfully, a lot of the powers around the world primarily want to see peace. Right, and so it would take a lot for us to really be in a war. A lot of our allies aren't not just right now backing something like that. Simply, one, because we embarrassed the president of Ukraine really bad here in the United States.
Saying that.
And we pulled out of a lot of the connections that we have. So we do have some really good allies, but we have backed out of some of those connections. And so we got to mend some fences before we can even get to that point.
Right.
And of course, like I said, the Congress would have to, approve a declaration of war, and then of course, voila, champagne, and you're on a new ship and traveling. So
new ship is crazy. I ain't getting on no boat.
So I mean, it's something that's good to think about, Amari. This affects you, and the good thing about it, by you being young, 23, you are, tomorrow's leaders. Right? You're a member of tomorrow's leaders, and so you need to be paying attention now, because one day you might be the president. And I'll be saying, oh, my God, Amari is cutting back on my benefits, man.
Oh, my benefits.
So, yeah.
Well, yeah, but again, I agree with what Mr. Murray, was definitely stating, that there's a lot of young people that is, caught up in, social media. And, as we said before, they're more concerned about, like, shares and comments and how many followers they have and so on and so forth. And they need to pay attention a little bit more of what's kind of going on today in our society that truly kind of affects them, maybe not directly at this point in time, but definitely has some type of indirect impact, on them. And, given certain facts that will come into play or could come into play, somebody might be, giving you a call and knocking on your door, talking about, it's time,
Yes,
and,
yes, sir.
if you not, mentally and, things of that nature ready, it can, be even more, of a hardship, on you, your family and friends, et cetera, et cetera. When we're talking about, those that are being taken into custody, whether that's, this whole Hispanic culture that's being taken in the country for deportation type stuff, or we're just talking about, your average, U.S. citizen, I wanted to take a minute, to give a little bit of a shout out to the Minneapolis Urban League and also the Bethany Community Center. And I'm certain that there's other services and resources out there throughout the Twin Cities metropolitan area, Minneapolis, St. Paul, etc. That's offering a lot of services and resources to help you out, not only with, criminal matters, if you will, but there's a lot of other resources out there to help you pay for rent, pay for your utilities, help you with first-time home ownership, whatever it is. There's a lot of different, resources and services out there. And these two entities, the Minneapolis Urban League and also the Bethany Community Center, two places, two entities that I strongly encourage, anyone and everyone, honestly, to go and check out and just kind of see, what they have to offer. There's a lot of construction programs, IT programs, carpentry programs, things of that nature, especially for you young folks. And this stuff is pretty much free, for you, so please, get on over to these entities, and check them out. And the Urban League is over off of, what is that, Penn and Plymouth? No, that is, what is
that's
that?
Penn and Plymouth.
Penn and Plymouth, on the corner right there, 2100 Plymouth Avenue North. Go on over there and check them out. And then the Minneapolis Urban League is right over off of 35th and 4th?
Yes.
So go on over there and check them out as well and see what services, resources, et cetera, that you might be able to retain from them. And again, I want to, just say thank you to those two entities and other entities that I may not have mentioned, that are out there doing outstanding work, providing services and resources to the community as well. Young folks, I want to say again, pay attention, to what's kind of going on out here in our society. Don't be so quick or eager just to be on social media and talking about likes, shares, comments, et cetera, because there's just so much more, to that. Reach out to, your parents. Have those conversations, with your parents. Honestly and respectfully, if your parents or things of that nature is not available, reach out to other family members, or maybe even your friends, parents. I guarantee you that there's someone out there, or maybe even over at the Urban League or Bethany Center that has some type of services or resources for you to sit down and talk to and be able to help you, plan, your future. So then therefore you can be a much more successful in what it is that you want to do and you want to become in this society. I think, Joel, you said, said something very similar to this, some time ago. Change has occurred and change will continue to occur. For us old heads, 50, 60 plus years of age, sometimes, we're kind of set in our ways, and sometimes we might even rebel a little bit more against change, or heck, in some cases, don't even care, about the change because we think we closer to the end than we are the beginning, right? But for you young folks, you are right in the middle. You're right in the midst of all of these different changes that are coming. And whether that has to do with Trump, signing some type of thing for tariffs, or, just things that are happening in your own backyard, or whatever the case may be, pay attention, get involved, because you definitely need to have an input and an impact on your outcome.
Yes, sir.
Do not sit back and allow anyone, to sit here and dictate on who you are, how you are, how far you can go. Don't allow anyone to limit you, because the sky, is truly the limit. And even though that we are facing some times that, we may not necessarily like, agree, understand, etc., we have to learn how to maneuver in this society, right? Whether we agree or not, we have to learn how to maneuver. And the earlier that you educate yourself, the more that you're going to be able to empower yourself. The more that you're able to empower yourself, the better outcome you will have. And that's what I'm going to kind of leave, for you young folks. I know that, we're kind of rounding, that corner of another fabulous show. And we talked a lot about, potential wars. We talked about tariffs. We talked about the draft a little bit. And again, I want to kind of continue to speak about these topics, as we move forward, because again, we do have some years, to go, with Mr. Trump being in office. And as we say, there's folks that support him, folks that don't. But whether you support him or not, you need to make sure that you're paying attention, and again, and when we're talking about government, let me just kind of scroll back a little bit, because I think that we kind of pick on, or it appears that we're picking on Mr. Donald Trump a little bit too much. The president's going to do what the president's going to do, right? But pay attention to your local, politicians. And we're talking about your judges. We're talking about your sheriffs. We're talking about a lot of different things that, impact you more directly, in your own backyard. These are where a lot of the true changes and the true impacts are going to directly impact you. And this is why you need to truly be involved in what's kind of going on in your own backyard.
I think what's unique is that people don't realize, though, we look at the Independent Party, we look at the Democratic Party, and we look at the Republican Party, but there are other organizations out there that do lobby Congress for different laws and things of that nature. So it would behoove you to figure out what organizations are doing what's the Constitution, what is the laws within the Constitution, and kind of what does that consist of. So understanding the law is your best defense of being prepared for what any president would throw down the road for you, so you have an understanding of what your rights are as an American citizen. And just remember that the power comes from the people. The presidency is an institution. So even though he's in that office, there are certain guidelines that we want to make sure that he holds firm to, regardless to who's in that office. And so that's something that we have to understand and remember more than anything. And just understand that Trump's policy doesn't necessarily hold, weight for 4 years. There's a good chance that if, the vice president sticks around and throws his hat in the ring, that he could actually be the next president for another 8 years. So we're looking at possibly 12 years of Trump policy if Vance wins, the nominee for the Republican Party. So just a lot of food for thought to pay attention to understanding how the government works. But as of right now, Trump is what we consider to be in politics a lame duck, which means that he can't. It's a funny term, but it is a legal term, in that he can only run 2 terms, and so he's on his second term. That makes him a lame duck. He can't run again unless the Constitution would be able to change. So, like you said, we're right around the corner. The producer's in here now. We want to go ahead and try to lean toward wrapping things up here in the end. I do want to send a quick shout out to Twin Cities Recovery Project. Folks over in North and South Minneapolis, there's some resources out there for those folks dealing with opiate addiction, things of that nature. We want to remind folks that the Banks Youth Centers will eventually start taking applications here in this next week, going to the summer programs, getting prepared for summer. So if you want to get your child in a summer day camp, make sure you're going on to banksyouthcenters.weebly.com, signing your kid up, getting some information about how you can sign your kid up this summer for the summer camp youth program. Also,
all right.
Black Butterfly is going to be, having some stuff going on. So make sure you check out Black Butterfly. That's a program for young women of color, aged 18 to 25, who have had some small, brief run-in with law enforcement and looking to get back on track. So make sure you check out Black Butterfly and their CEO over there, Amber Brown. And then, of course, shout out to Mother's Love, Mad Dads, and Push for Peace about what they're trying to do in the community to keep folks safe. So just remember, these folks are out and about in the community. If you need some resources, keep on checking, and you'll be able to get some help for your loved ones. And last but not least, depression is real. Make sure that you're checking on your family members. If folks are telling you they're depressed, sad, upset, check on them, make sure they're okay, take it, serious, because we've had a number of suicides and the numbers are going up and up and up and up and up. All right, Beeks, I'm going to swing it back to your way, then I'll let Mari go ahead and give a brief summary, and then I'll hit him up.
And then that's exactly where I was leaning. I'm going to go with that. Sure. Mr. Mari, I'm going to give you 1 minute to be able to give our listening and viewing audience, especially, for young people, if there was something that you would like to leave them with, to educate them, empower them, and enhance them, what would that be?
Stay out the streets. I know a lot of people look on social media and they glorifying it like it's fun or it's a game. But people real life get hurt. And if you ain't already going down that path, stay away, because I see a lot of young people looking up to people and thinking it's cool to gang bang, play with guns, and a lot of people don't even know how to use the guns, end up accidentally killing their friends and or shooting themselves. Like, if you have no reason to go that route, stay away from that route. I finish school, go to school, finish school. And go to work. A lot of people try to glorify, like, having a 9-to-5 is something to talk down bad, but if you get you could really make a real nice killing if you stay with that job. A lot of people try to make it seem like it's lame to work 9-to-5 because you ain't out here scamming, selling drugs, or doing the et cetera that they're doing to make it the fast way. All money is not good money.
Okay. All right, Beeks.
Absolutely. Well, I greatly appreciate that, man. So, again, we are down to the end of another fabulous show of Let's Talk About, where we are here each and every Wednesday, where we really, truly appreciate our listening and viewing audience. Again, if there's any resources, services, or if there's anything you want to kind of get off your chest, please come on down, be a part. This is where your voice can be heard. Remember, Joe said it best. You, the people, makes the changes. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn on over to Joe so we can get on out of here.
All right. We here every week. Make sure you're checking us out, guys. We appreciate you joining us. We want to say thank you to CCX Creates for allowing us to do what we do, and the producers for doing what they do behind the scenes to keep us working and turking and keeping things going for you out there in the community. With that being said, I'm going to wrap things up with that last backpack. That backpack consists of making sure you got your driver's license and insurance with you before you get in that car. Remember to place it above the visor. That way it's easily accessible. Stopped by law enforcement, won't be mistaken for a weapon. Remember to stay calm. Keep your hands where they can be seen. Allow the officer to go through his spiel. And as always, make it on home to your loved one. Same thing when walking down the street. Make sure you got your driver's license or ID where it's easily accessible. Remember to stay calm. Keep your hands where they can be seen. Allow the officer to go through his spiel, and as always, make it on home to your loved ones. Been another great show. We enjoy having you guys. We'll see you next week. My name's Joe Banks.
And I'm Anthijuan Beeks.
And we just talked about it. Peace.
Peace.